Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at something that I think is really important for anybody who cares about education. And that is self-monitoring for teachers.
Yes.
We've got some excerpts here from a document that explores how teachers can use self-monitoring techniques to improve their practice.
Right.
To get better at what they do.
Yeah.
And ultimately help students be more successful.
It's really fascinating stuff. And I think one of the things that the document does really well is it frames this whole idea of self-monitoring as something that's positive.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's not about teachers being super critical of themselves or beating themselves up over every little mistake.
You're right.
It's really about using self-monitoring as a tool for intentional growth.
Intentional growth.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. It sounds a lot more proactive.
It is.
And empowering than just, critiquing yourself all the time.
Exactly. And, the document even goes as far as connecting this to the concept of reflective teaching. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I've heard that term.
So it's really about moving beyond just, kind of going through the motions of delivering lessons.
Right.
And instead actively analyzing the connection between what you're doing as a teacher and the actual impact it's having on your students.
Okay. So can you give me like a real world example of how this reflective teaching might play out in a classroom?
Sure. So let's say you're a teacher and you start to notice that your students are consistently zoning out during a particular activity.
Yeah.
Now, a reflective teacher wouldn't just kind of shrug it off and say, oh, well, kids will be kids, or it's Friday afternoon, or whatever.
Right, right.
They would actually use self-monitoring to kind of dig deeper and ask themselves, what's going on here? Is it the time of day? Is it the activity itself? Is it my delivery style?
Yeah.
By really thinking about how their actions are connected to that student impact, they can pinpoint the issue and make adjustments.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Right.
It's almost like a continuous improvement engine for teachers.
Yeah, I love that.
You're constantly gathering data, analyzing it, and then tweaking your approach to be more effective.
Absolutely.
Now, speaking of data, I am kind of curious about how teachers can actually measure the impact of their self-monitoring efforts.
Well, the document really stresses the importance of setting SMART goals.
Okay.
So these are goals that are...
And I assume that's an acronym.
It is. Yes. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Got it.
So instead of just generally saying, oh, I want to improve student engagement,
Right.
You would set a more specific goal, like, I want to increase student participation in class discussions by 15% over the next month.
Okay.
That way you can actually track your progress and see if the changes you're making are having the effect you want.
So you're not just hoping that you're improving, you're actually gathering evidence to support your growth.
Exactly.
And speaking of growth, one thing that the document makes really clear is that the benefits of self-monitoring extend far beyond just the individual teacher.
Oh, for sure.
There's this ripple effect that ultimately leads to better outcomes for students.
Absolutely.
There's the whole point, right?
Exactly.
And there's this really great example in the document about a teacher who realizes that their explanation of a really complex concept was just not landing with the students. The kids were confused.
They were totally lost. And through self-monitoring, the teacher was able to identify the issue.
Right.
Adjust their approach, make the concept more accessible, and suddenly, boom, student understanding improves.
I love that example.
It's a good one.
It really brings it home.
Yeah.
But, let's face it, the document doesn't pretend that self-monitoring is like a walk in the park.
Oh, of course not.
It acknowledges some very real challenges that teachers face when trying to put these techniques into practice.
And one of the biggest is time.
Yeah.
Teachers are already so incredibly busy.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So finding the time for self-reflection and analysis can feel like a luxury they just don't have.
That is a concern that I hear from teachers all the time. So how does the document address that? What are some strategies for making self-monitoring more manageable within the constraints of a teacher's already packed schedule?
Well, one suggestion is to try to weave reflection into your existing routines.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not about adding extra hours to your day.
Right.
It's more about being really intentional with the time you already have.
Yeah.
So, for example, instead of just grading papers on autopilot,
Yeah.
use that time to also reflect on what those papers are telling you about student understanding.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Are there patterns emerging? Are certain concepts consistently tripping students up?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of quick analysis can really inform your future lessons.
That's a really practical tip.
Yeah.
It's about working smarter, not harder.
I like that.
And the document also talks about using technology strategically.
Yes.
Now, I'm assuming that means more than just, checking emails and posting assignments online.
Oh, absolutely. There are some amazing tech tools out there that can really streamline this whole self-monitoring process.
Okay.
For example, there are apps that make note-taking super easy, or even recording your lessons, which can be incredibly eye-opening.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it allows you to see yourself from the student's perspective.
Oh.
You might notice things that you totally missed in the moment, like subtle nonverbal cues,
Okay.
or how students are reacting to certain activities.
I can imagine that being both fascinating and a little terrifying at the same time,
It can be both, for sure.
but ultimately valuable.
But yeah, ultimately valuable.
Okay, so we talked about time constraints,
Yeah.
but the document also brings up emotional barriers
Yes.
as a major challenge for teachers.
This is huge.
It can be tough to step back and objectively analyze your own performance
Oh, it is.
because it feels personal.
It's so personal.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do the documents suggest we tackle these emotional hurdles?
One strategy is to invite peer feedback.
Okay.
So have a trusted colleague, observe your class, and offer some constructive insights. That outside perspective can be so valuable because they're seeing things that you might miss.
And it takes some of the pressure off of you too,
Exactly.
because you're not just relying on your own potentially biased self-assessment.
Right.
So it sounds like the document is really all about giving teachers these concrete tools and strategies
Yes.
to make self-monitoring feel less daunting.
And there are a bunch more tools that the document talks about too.
Oh, okay. Like what?
Well, there's the idea of using structured checklists or rubrics.
Okay.
So you're assessing yourself against these really clear criteria,
Gotcha.
and that can take some of the subjectivity out of it.
Right.
And even something as simple as keeping a reflective journal
Yeah.
can be super powerful.
Oh, I can see that.
Yeah. Just taking the time to jot down your thoughts and observations about your teaching can reveal patterns and insights that you might not have noticed otherwise.
So it's all about giving yourself that space
Yeah.
to really process and analyze your experiences.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about all these tools and strategies,
Mm-hmm.
but I wonder how teachers can actually prove that self-monitoring is making a difference.
That's a good question.
Like, it's one thing to feel like you're improving,
Right.
but how do you demonstrate that to others like administrators or even parents?
Well, that's where those SMART goals that we talked about earlier come in.
Okay.
Remember, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound.
Yes.
By setting those specific, measurable goals, you're not just aiming for this vague improvement.
Right.
You're creating a framework for tracking your progress and showing the impact of your efforts.
Gotcha.
So instead of aiming to generally improve student engagement, you might set a goal to increase student participation in class discussions by 15% over the next month.
Okay.
Then you can actually track that participation, gather the data, and show concrete evidence of how your self-monitoring is translating into real results.
Wow. Okay, so that's a really powerful way to kind of showcase your growth.
It
takes the guesswork out of it and makes it much more tangible.
for sure.
Okay, so we've covered the what and the why of self-monitoring,
Mm-hmm.
and we've even delved into some of the challenges and strategies for overcoming them.
Right.
But I think what a lot of people are probably wondering at this point is,
Yeah.
how do teachers make this a sustainable part of their practice?
Yes. How do you keep that momentum going?
And how do you keep the momentum going beyond that initial burst of enthusiasm?
That's where things get really interesting, and the document actually has some really insightful suggestions.
Okay, don't leave me hanging. Let's explore those suggestions in part 2 of our deep dive.
Sounds good. Well, one of the things that the document highlights is this idea of formalizing self-monitoring as part of professional development plans.
Oh, interesting.
So if it's actually built into the system and expectations,
Mm-hmm.
it's much more likely to become a habit.
That makes sense.
Right. It's not just this like optional extra thing.
Yeah.
It's like a core component of what it means to be a teacher.
The start of the job.
Exactly. And it also sends a message to teachers that this is something that's valued,
Yeah.
Their growth and development is actually supported by the school.
Right. It's not just like, oh, yeah, you should do this in your spare time.
Right. And the document also talks about how school leadership has a really important role to play here.
Okay.
It's not enough to just tell teachers, hey, you should self-monitor. They need to provide the resources and the time and the training to actually make it happen.
So it's about creating a culture where self-monitoring is embraced and supported at every level.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But, as we're talking about formalizing this process,
Mhm.
I can't help but think about those teachers who might be resistant to this kind of change.
Yeah, for sure.
How do we get buy-in from everyone?
That's a great question. And, the document acknowledges that change can be challenging.
Yeah.
But one suggestion that they have is to involve teachers in the process right from the get-go.
Sure.
So instead of just imposing a top-down approach,
Right.
you give teachers a voice in shaping how self-monitoring is implemented in their school.
Okay.
So let them help develop the rubrics, the checklists, the professional development plans.
So it becomes more of a collaborative effort,
Exactly.
not just a mandate from above.
Yeah, and I think that can make a huge difference in terms of getting people on board.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
And as we're talking about making self-monitoring a sustainable practice, I'm reminded of something you mentioned earlier about using technology strategically.
Yes.
I'm curious to explore that a bit further.
Sure.
What are some specific tech tools that can actually help teachers with this process?
Oh, there are so many great options out there.
Okay.
And the document actually names a few. So for note-taking and reflection, there are tools like Evernote or Google Keep, where you can jot down observations, brainstorm ideas, track your progress over time.
Right.
And then for those who prefer a more visual approach, there are these mind mapping tools like MindMeister, XMind.
Oh, yeah. I love those.
Yeah, they can help you kind of organize your thoughts and make connections between different aspects of your teaching.
I'm a very visual person,
Mm-hmm.
so those tools are really helpful for me.
Me too.
What about for those teachers who are interested in recording their lessons?
Right. So that's a great strategy, and there are tons of user-friendly tools out there for that as well.
Okay.
A lot of schools already have some kind of classroom-based system, but even a simple smartphone can be super effective.
Right.
The key is that the technology doesn't get in the way.
Yeah.
Teachers should be able to easily record and review and reflect on their lessons without feeling bogged down by a bunch of technical hurdles.
So it's about finding tools that fit seamlessly into their workflow.
Exactly.
Gotcha. What I'm hearing is that technology can play a really powerful role in making self-monitoring more efficient and less time-consuming.
It can.
It's not a replacement for thoughtful reflection,
Right.
but it can definitely enhance the process.
Absolutely. It's about using technology to kind of free up teachers' mental energy so they can focus on what matters most, which is analyzing their practice and finding ways to improve.
Makes sense.
And, the document also highlights how technology can help teachers connect with a wider community of educators.
Oh, that's interesting.
So there are online forums and social media groups and professional development platforms where teachers can share their experiences, learn from others, get support for their self-monitoring journey.
That's so important because I think it's easy to feel isolated as a teacher.
Oh, it is.
Especially when you're trying something new.
Absolutely.
Having that network of support can make all the difference.
It really can.
As we're talking about all this, it makes me think back to something the document mentioned that I found really intriguing.
Okay, what's that?
This idea that self-monitoring isn't just about individual teacher growth.
Right.
It can actually benefit students in a profound way.
Yes.
By helping them become more self-regulated learners.
I love that concept.
Me too.
It makes perfect sense.
It does.
If we're constantly modeling self-reflection and continuous improvement for our students, they're much more likely to embrace those habits themselves.
That's like we're saying, hey, look, even teachers are always learning and trying to get better.
Right.
That's got to be incredibly motivating for students.
I think so. And, another thing that the document touches on is this idea of fostering teacher autonomy and agency through self-monitoring.
Okay.
So it's about shifting away from this idea of relying solely on external evaluations or feedback from administrators.
So instead of feeling like you're constantly being judged,
right,
you're taking ownership of your own professional growth.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
Self-monitoring empowers teachers to identify their own strengths and areas for improvement and then tailor their learning experiences to meet their specific needs.
It's like becoming the CEO of your own professional development.
I love that.
You're setting the goals, charting the course, and celebrating the wins along the way.
Exactly. And that sense of ownership, I think, can be incredibly motivating and empowering for teachers.
I agree.
And, the document actually goes into some really specific strategies for effective self-monitoring.
Okay.
And I think this is where it gets really practical for our listeners.
Let's get into the nitty-gritty.
All right. So one classic but powerful approach is journaling and reflective writing.
Okay.
Just taking the time to write down your experiences, your thoughts, your observations about your teaching can be so insightful.
It's like having a conversation with yourself on paper.
In a way, yeah. And the document emphasizes that over time, these journals become these valuable records of your growth and learning.
Oh, well, that's cool.
Yeah, you can actually look back and see how far you've come.
It's tangible evidence of your professional journey.
Exactly what other strategies does the document suggest?
Oh, no.
Well, another really effective technique, and especially in today's tech-savvy world, is video recording your lectures.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that.
We did.
And I can imagine that can be really revealing.
You might notice things that you totally missed in the moment, like subtle nonverbal cues, or how students are reacting to certain activities.
Right, like, are they getting it?
Exactly.
Are they totally lost?
And that objective view can be incredibly valuable for self-reflection and improvement.
Okay, cool. What else?
Well, the document also highlights the use of self-assessment checklists.
Okay, so you're basically creating a set of criteria to evaluate your own performance in specific areas.
Exactly.
Like lesson planning or classroom management.
Precisely. It provides structure, and it helps to ensure that you're focusing on those key aspects of your teaching.
Okay.
And then, of course, there's the power of peer observation and feedback, which we touched on a little bit earlier.
Yes, having a trusted colleague observe your class and offer constructive criticism.
It's so valuable.
It can be a real game changer.
It is. It's about getting that outside perspective, which can be so important for growth.
Yeah.
And then finally, the document emphasizes the importance of setting SMART goals. We talked about that a little bit in the context of measuring impact, but it's also really crucial for guiding your self-monitoring efforts.
So it's about having those specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound goals to keep you focused and motivated.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. You know, as we're exploring all these different strategies, it's making me think about the bigger picture here.
Yes, me too. Like, if we connect this to the bigger picture, imagine a school culture where self-monitoring isn't just encouraged, but it's actively supported by leadership.
Okay, now that is an interesting thought.
Yeah.
What would that look like? What could a truly supportive environment for self-monitoring look like in a school setting?
Well, I think first and foremost, it would require a real Sherman mindset.
Okay.
So instead of viewing self-monitoring as this extra burden,
right,
it would be embraced as this core component of professional development.
So it wouldn't be something that teachers feel pressured to do,
right,
but something that they feel empowered to do.
Exactly. And I think leadership would play a key role in fostering that kind of culture. Okay.
You know, they would provide the resources, the time, the training that's necessary for teachers to really engage in meaningful self-monitoring.
So it wouldn't just be lip service.
Right.
It would be backed up with concrete action.
Exactly.
What else might this look like in practice?
Well, imagine having dedicated time built into the schedule for reflection and collaboration.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe there are regular peer observation sessions or professional development workshops that are focused specifically on self-monitoring techniques.
So it's about weaving self-monitoring into the fabric of the school day.
Yes.
And the school's culture.
Exactly. And it could even extend to how teacher performance is evaluated.
Oh, wow.
So instead of relying solely on standardized tests or administrator observations, self-reflection and growth could be key factors.
That's such an interesting concept.
It is.
It would really incentivize teachers to take ownership of this process.
Absolutely.
If it was valued as part of their overall evaluation.
Imagine the ripple effect.
Yeah. If students saw that their teachers' growth and development were genuinely valued and celebrated by the school.
It's about creating a culture of continuous learning for everyone.
Yes.
From the students to the teachers to the administrators.
I love that.
That's a powerful idea.
It is. And, thinking about this kind of supportive environment makes me realize that this goes way beyond just helping individual teachers.
Right.
We're talking about potentially transforming the entire educational landscape.
Wow. Okay. I like the sound of that.
It's pretty remarkable when you think about it.
Okay. So paint me a picture.
If we can really cultivate this culture of self-monitoring, we're not just impacting individual teachers or even individual schools.
Right.
We're nurturing a whole generation of educators.
Wow.
Who are empowered and reflective and constantly seeking ways to evolve their practice. Can you imagine the impact that could have on student learning engagement and ultimately their future success?
That's incredible. It's like planting a seed that could grow into a whole forest of positive change.
It really is.
It is pretty inspiring to think about.
Yeah. And, as we were talking about all those real world challenges that teachers face, it struck me that so many of those obstacles are actually systemic.
Oh.
It's not just about individual teachers lacking time or struggling with objectivity.
Right.
It's about the structures and supports or lack thereof that are in place.
So you're saying it's not enough to just tell teachers, hey, you should self-monitor.
Right. We need to create an environment that actually makes it possible.
That supports them.
That supports them, yeah.
Okay.
And that's where this vision of a school culture that really embraces self-monitoring becomes so crucial.
Yeah, I see that.
It's about providing the time, the resources, the training, the encouragement that teachers need to truly thrive.
It's about making self-monitoring the norm, not the exception.
Exactly. And, as we're wrapping up this deep dive, It makes me think about what you, our listener, can do to contribute to this vision.
Ooh, I like that. Let's empower our listeners to take action.
Yes. What can they do, even if they're not a teacher or a school administrator?
Right.
Well, first and foremost, spread the word.
Yes.
Share this conversation with others.
Yeah.
Talk to teachers. Parents, school board members, anyone who cares about the future of education.
It's about raising awareness and getting those conversations started.
Exactly, because those conversations can lead to real change.
Right.
What else can listeners do? Well, advocate for policies that support teacher development and autonomy.
Okay.
Support schools that are prioritizing reflective practice and continuous improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a parent, encourage your child's teachers to engage in self-monitoring.
Yeah.
Let them know that you value their growth and development.
Those are all great ideas.
Yeah.
Very concrete, actionable steps that anyone can take.
Yeah, and I think collectively they can make a huge difference.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, this isn't just about teachers.
No.
It's about creating a better future for all of us.
Well said.
And on that inspiring note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive. We've explored the what, the why, the how, and even the what if of self-monitoring for teachers.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
It really has.
And I hope our listeners are walking away with a renewed appreciation for the power of reflective practice.
Yes.
And a sense of possibility for what education can become.
I agree 100%. And remember, the conversation doesn't end here.
It doesn't.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep advocating for a future where every teacher has the support they need to be the best they can be.
So well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.
Keep learning, keep growing, and keep making a difference, everyone.